My name is Sarah Peterson. I'm with Gary Bess Associates, and I'm giving the housekeeping introduction for today's webinar. The agenda for today's webinar was shared in advance over email, and soon we'll provide a message in the chat box that gives you the link from which you can download the agenda and today's slides. I'd like to highlight several things about our presentation. First, there will be a 5-minute break in the second half of the webinar. And at the end, we'll have our question and answer period, hopefully about 10 minutes. We'll be discussing your questions that you shared through the Q&A box, and there will be an opportunity to take live questions from the group. This is optional, and you'll clearly see in your Zoom interface if you're being offered the chance to unmute and speak to the group. We'll do this if you've raised your hand using the raise hand button in Zoom. Finally, at the end of the webinar, as you leave, we'll share a short survey that will open in your browser window. If you're willing to share your thoughts on today's event, we'd welcome it. And with that, I will turn it over to our first speaker this afternoon, Dr. Lily Bowie of Philanthropy California. Lily?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our very first webinar for our climate capacity work at Philanthropy California. I'm seeing around 108 people here. I'm sure more will trickle in. Thank you so much for being here. We're so glad that you found us. I am the Climate and Disaster Resilience Manager at SoCal Grantmakers, and I'm part of the wider Philanthropy California team. Whether you're tuning in live now or listening to the recording from today, thank you again for being here. I'm going to start by giving a brief background of Philanthropy California, then tell you a little bit about our partnership with the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, and then end with why we're all here today for this webinar. If you haven't heard about us before, Philanthropy California, or PhilCA for short, is an initiative of California's 3 major philanthropy-serving organizations. That includes Catalyst of San Diego and Imperial Counties, NorCal Grantmakers, and SoCal Grantmakers. As philanthropy-serving organizations, we ourselves do not make grants, but we host a membership of more than 600 foundations, corporate funders, philanthropic individuals and families, giving circles, and government agencies. And our work focuses on key issues impacting our state and nation, such as advancing equity, racial and gender justice, building an inclusive democracy, climate and disaster resilience, and nonprofit sustainability. Now, for our climate and disaster resilience work, we have an amazing statewide team of individuals from across the Philanthropy California Alliance, and I'd love to acknowledge them here. We have Carla Mercado, the Director of Philanthropy California, Megan Thomas, President CEO of Catalyst of San Diego and Imperial Counties, Kiran Kumar, the Director of Climate and Disaster Resilience at NorCal Grantmakers, and Katie Oren, the Climate and Disaster Resilience Manager at NorCal Grantmakers. We're also working with Gary Bess and Associates, our implementing partner, who will be introducing their team shortly. Because we all represent different geographies in California, our separate organizations engage in climate and disaster work within our regions. But when we want to engage at a statewide level, like for this project, we do so under the Philanthropy California umbrella. The webinar that you're attending today launches a new initiative for our team, but that's not to say that we're new to this work. Philanthropy California has established statewide disaster response infrastructure for the philanthropic sector to deliver critical information on nonprofit needs to funders. And our organizations collectively have influenced over $1 billion in disaster preparedness, relief, and recovery grants for various hazards, including wildfires, COVID, earthquakes, and flooding. And from the work that we've done so far, we've learned quite a bit about the landscape, although we are still learning each day. In 2023, for instance, $16.9 billion of disaster philanthropy funding was invested in the United States. At the same time, the state of California alone incurs an average annual loss of $117 billion due to wildfires. So over the last 4 years, Philanthropy California has deepened our partnership with Cal OES, leading to the creation of this technical assistance training series. Well, why focus on technical assistance? First off, we know that qualifying for, receiving, and managing disaster assistance is burdensome for small to mid-sized nonprofits, especially BIPOC-led and tribal organizations. Also, nonprofit capacity building is a key pillar of our work as philanthropy-serving organizations. We see this initiative as a foundation for building community-centered partnerships to support ongoing and new climate and disaster resilience initiatives across the state. What do we mean by technical assistance? So for us, it definitely goes beyond just grant writing support. We view technical assistance as a form of capacity building to support the readiness of community-based organizations and tribes to access public funding. So what does this look like? Over the course of the next year, in 2024, we will be delivering 8 in-person regional trainings, 5 virtual trainings, as well as direct one-on-one appointments to work with grant writing professionals for direct assistance. And I should emphasize, these trainings are free of charge for CBOs and tribes seeking public funding for climate and disaster resilience. I'm going to repeat that. These trainings are free of charge. So please sign up for our mailing list, stay in touch about future opportunities, both virtually and in person. We really want to be a resource for you, and we look forward to being a resource. And with that, I would love to introduce our next speaker, Abby Browning, Chief of Private Sector and NGO Coordination at Cal OES, to talk a little bit more about our partnership.
Thank you, Lily. As she mentioned, my name is Abby. I'm the Chief of the Office of Private Sector NGO Coordination here at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. First, I want to apologize. I will not be able to stay for the entire webinar today. As any of you know that's in California, it's getting ready to rain. We are activated at the state level. The State Operations Center is activated at a level 3. In preparedness, we're pre-positioning resources throughout the state. Flood fighting materials, sandbags, firefighters, hand crews all around the state in preparedness of what is to come. Please, if you have not done so already, connect with your local emergency services for local alerts so you are aware of what's going on. Water is very dangerous. It's a misnomer. A lot of people don't think that it's nearly as dangerous as it is, but heed the warnings. Turn around, don't drown, as we move forward on that. So having said that, I had to peel away time today to come to this event. I hope that you understand how important this series is to the governor and to the administration as we move forward. A few years ago, Governor Newsom enacted the Listos California program here at Cal OES. And what that is a series of grants that go out to help reach some of our more vulnerable communities and our underserved communities in California. That program itself was given a lot of leeway. How can we reach these communities? And so we listened. And one of the things we heard loud and clear is, that's great that you're giving out a grant, but I don't have the time to learn how to be a grant writer. I don't have the capacity within my organization to apply for a grant. The program, again, is Listos California. It is, they will talk more about it later on during the presentation on the actual grant application. But we listened loud and clear that we were unable to attract more CBOs in California because of that technical assistance that was needed. So we entered into a partnership with Philanthropy California to develop this program. We are beyond thrilled that this is happening. We are hoping that this spurs more programs like this throughout California with other types of grants. And then we're also hoping that while this is happening in California, some of our other states will take a look, and our federal partners will take a look at how successful this is, and that they might need to do that as well. So this is just the beginning. It's very important that we're here. I want to thank you all for coming and participating, and we are actively accepting feedback to make things better as we move along. But like Lily said, we are excited to have this with our partners in Philanthropy California, that is Northern California, Southern California, and San Diego, moving forward. Having said that, if you have questions for me, because I will not be able to be there, feel free to ask the team here. They know how to get a hold of me. I am a public servant. I am at they're ready to answer questions, but there are some of my colleagues that are also on this call that are subject matter experts in the program and that can help. So having said that, thank you. I appreciate you being here. Stay safe, stay dry, get that information out to your communities to try to keep them safe as we go into this storm system. And I would like to now hand it over to Katie with Gary Bess Associates.
Good afternoon, everyone. By now you should all see the slides here. My name is Katie Strautman, and I'm a principal at Gary Bess Associates. We are delighted you are here with us today, whether you're participating live or watching the recording, as we embark on an important initiative to build capacity for a climate and disaster resilient California. I am joined today by my colleagues, Gary Bess, GBA's founder and co-principal, Mike Nichols, a senior grant writer with us, and Sarah Peterson, the Philanthropy California project coordinator and point of contact for this initiative. You will be hearing from each of them during today's presentation. Founded in 1991, GBA, or Gary Bess Associates, is a thought partner, grant writer, and evaluator, helping not-for-profit organizations and public agencies fulfill their missions and better serve their clients and communities. Therefore, our mission is to make your mission possible. Many of our staff have a social work background and focus, which we leverage in supporting people and organizations. We look at the big picture and have the expertise to help people and organizations address large systemic issues. This could be through grant writing, strategic planning, community needs assessments, and grant compliance and reporting. To this end, we help people and organizations by bringing resources to community. And we really believe in this work. We get as excited as you do when you get funded. We really do share in your success. The GBA team, pictured here, has a lot of experience and resources to help you and your organization succeed. Our expert consultants have experience working on corporate, foundation, and government grants. We also have developed a specialty with Native American communities, including tribal governments, to assess grant-funded programs and services. Our staff provide grants management services, such as reviewing a request for proposal and providing a checklist of applications requirements. This initiative has a personal connection to GBA. Not only is this initiative timely in that we're experiencing an increase in natural disasters that have impacted our state, GBA was directly impacted by the Camp Fire in Northern California in 2018. As a result of this fire, which took lives and destroyed a majority of buildings and homes in Paradise, California, GBA lost its office building, pictured here, and many staff lost their homes. We have since bounced back with an entirely remote workplace model. However, we've learned a lot from this event and are still 5 years later dealing with the aftermath. With this initiative, GBA will be coordinating resources and offering technical assistance with our grant writing experts. This includes regional in-person trainings, webinars, and one-on-one technical assistance and consultation with individuals interested in grant readiness, troubleshooting a specific part of an application, or would like additional support with grant writing. No organization is too small to receive assistance. We are here to help you and empower you with the important work that you all are doing for people in the community. I would now like to pass the presentation over to Gary Bess.
Thank you, Katie, and it's a pleasure to be part of this exciting initiative. I'm Gary Bess, a co-principal and founder of Gary Bess Associates. Next slide, Katie. We have a wide range of webinar attendees on today's event. Attendees include small rural service agencies, large urban service providers, programs serving specific groups such as Native Americans, seniors, or low-income folks. Other participants are with environmentally focused organizations, university departments that work with communities, funders, public and private, and of course others. Furthermore, organizations have varied capacities with regard to grant writing, as you can see from this list. Some are all volunteer organizations, while others have small or large paid staffs. Others provide direct services, and yet others are engaged in planning and advocacy. Some are new to providing community services and have unrefined visions of what they want to do, while others are clear on their purpose. As would be expected, some attendees have rich grant writing experiences, and others are newbies. And similarly, some are skilled in financial management and budgeting, an important part of grant writing, while others are inexperienced. And lastly, as noted, some serve specific population groups that have specific needs, and others help the general community. Thus, the question that we had when preparing for today, how do we bridge variations in attendees' experience and interests? As we answered the question, we acknowledge that in grant writing, there are more similarities than differences across organizations and in the proposals that they prepare. No matter what level, there is something to learn or have reinforced in your practice. Importantly, technical writing is only a piece of the larger grant writing process. Next slide, Katie. Today's presentation will cover the following topics: an overview of grant writing skills, how to develop a concept for funding, how to develop a theory of change, common proposal structures and their purpose, and some do's and don'ts about grant writing. Next slide, Katie. Grant writing is a combination of technical skills and interactional skills. Technical skills are the abilities and knowledge that you need to perform specific tasks. Here are examples on this slide. Strategic planning, for example, is being able to connect the dots as you design your program and to anticipate potential strengths and weaknesses so that it leads to positive change. Problem framing is the ability to use data and other forms of documentation, such as reports, studies, or interviews, to clearly describe an unmet need. Data management is the ability to work with and compile, track, and present data in ways that demonstrate your capacity to report on the eventual success of the funded project. Program development pertains to the design of a program that will be accepted by those who you desire to help. Program assessment is the ability to plan for and implement an assessment or evaluation of your funded program to demonstrate that positive change has occurred. Management and operations is simply knowing how to launch and implement a new program. And budgeting is part of the grant writing process, in that well-developed budgets is another way of understanding the program's design, and it reflects your consideration of all anticipated expenses. Lastly, technical writing is your knowledge about how to prepare your proposal in response to guidelines for funding. Please note that technical writing is only a piece of the grant writing process, and in this list, it is last among other technical skills. Next slide, Katie. Interactional skills mean that proposal development is a collaborative process involving others to produce a well thought out product. While grant writing may be a solitary exercise, We don't plan in isolation, which means that we need the right people on our team, and this may include those who ultimately benefited from or will benefit from the proposed services or intervention. They bring expertise from their lived experiences and understanding the problem firsthand. You can see from this list, interactional skills are complementary to that of the technical side of grant writing. Here are examples. A collaborative team approach simply suggests that we all have something to contribute to the proposal. My background is in social work, and there is a saying in social work, and that's where you stand is where you sit, which suggests that there are different perspectives based on our experiences and role within the agency or the community. We want to ensure that all voices are heard in the grant writing process. Communication skills are necessary as we share ideas about our proposal. We want to listen well to others' ideas and to possibly build on their concepts as well as our own. Rhetorical sense is a reminder that there are two parties in grant writing, the applicant and the funder, and thus knowing your audience, meaning the funder, informs us about how we write our application. Knowledge of human behavior is a key dynamic in grant writing, in that in the human services field, we make assumptions about how people will react to our program or service that we intend to offer. This is based on our knowledge and experience in working with the grant's population of focus. Task and process skills are a reminder that successful grant writing combines both. Task skills mean that there are things to do when preparing your application, such as obtaining letters of support or mining data that you need to make your case for support. Process skills acknowledge the collaborative nature of grant writing, where time is allowed for discussion, ensuring every voice is heard. Lastly, a healthy competitive drive is a reminder that we are competing for funding with many other worthy programs. And while we never speak ill of others, we also think about how to make our proposal as competitive as possible. Next slide, Katie. The question is, where do we begin? And the answer is that we begin with an idea. In my experience, the hard part of grant writing is never the writing itself, but the challenge in conceptualizing your proposal so that you have something to write about. Conceptualization is key to successful grant writing. Here is one way to begin conceptualizing your proposed intervention. If you can identify the three programmatic components in the intersecting circles, you are on your way towards conceptualizing your proposal for funding. As you heard from Katie, we were affected by the Camp Fire in Paradise. Therefore, if we were to write a proposal for funding pertaining to this disaster, we would need to first decide on our service area, which could be the town of Paradise, or it could be a smaller or larger region, such as the northern or southern parts of the town, or larger, all Butte County, in which Paradise is located. A decision also needs to be made concerning our population of focus, as it could be seniors, or low-income renters, or small business owners who lost their shops. Each group likely experienced something different with regard to the Camp Fire's impact. Thus, the problem, the third circle, is to address each population. For example, if we were to focus on seniors, we know that Paradise was often regarded as a retirement community, and many older adults purchased mobile or manufactured homes, and having retired from urban areas, they cashed out with the sale of their home and paid cash for their new Paradise home. This meant that they did not have a mortgage, and without a mortgage, they didn't have a requirement for mortgage insurance. In this example, the problem could be a loss of a home, which was their primary investment as well, and without insurance, they are in need of assistance in applying for funds from FEMA and other sources dedicated to helping fire survivors rebuild. While there are, of course, many needs and responses, we also need to decide on the problem to be addressed. By completing the 3 intersecting circles, we are beginning to conceptualize our proposal. For example, we may propose to provide seniors displaced by the campfire due to loss of their home and without insurance, assistance in applying for emergency support through special programs for which they qualify. Next, Katie. As I said previously, we begin by developing a concept from an idea. Responses to a problem can come from external sources or internally from within our organization. For example, the Triple Aim was a federal initiative a few years ago to fund projects that would reduce cost, improve quality of services, and improve service outcomes. Applicants, therefore, had to respond with a proposal that addressed these 3 aims. Sometimes funders tell you what they are interested in funding, such as a specific population of focus or service model, such as low-income rural residents or behavioral health services for disaster victims. Other times, ideas come from within, such as service trends within your organization, like an increase in a specific service line, such as an uptick in food bank participation, or requests for services that you do not currently provide. A response can also be prompted by unexpected events, such as a natural disaster or community-specific occurrence, like a school shooting or closing of a health center or major employer. Lastly, we sometimes hear from colleagues in the field, or we read about something that has worked elsewhere within a comparable community or population, and it may work in our community as well. Depending on how well developed the model is you propose to replicate, it can be an evidence-based practice or simply practice-based evidence. Future trainings will talk more about these terms. Next slide. While funders may inspire a response, be careful to avoid what is termed mission drift, which is applying for funding for its own sake, that is absent of the need for the service or your ability to implement the program. Be careful not to follow the dollars to a place that may be outside of your expertise or needs within the community. Form, meaning your program, should never follow funding unless it coincides. Next slide. As we develop our concept, we're making assumptions about human behavior, which is supported by a theory of change. A theory of change explains our assumptions about how certain activities will produce a series of responses or results that contribute to achieving a final intended impact. A theory of change can be developed for any level of intervention, a one-time event, a continuing program, a policy, or change at the organizational or community level. Next, Katie. The challenge in the human services field is that proposing interventions is not rocket science. And we wish that it was. Rocket science has successfully put a person on the moon, and yet we cannot solve many social problems. Here is a picture of a scientist trying to explain a chemical reaction. And in the middle of the formula, he writes, "Then a miracle occurs." This suggests that there are still unknowns in many parts of science, including the social sciences in which we are engaged. Next slide, Katie. We can learn from Alice in Wonderland as to why a theory of change is important. Next slide. When Alice arrives in Wonderland, she meets the Cheshire Cat. "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" said Alice. "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to," said the Cheshire Cat. Alice says, "I don't much care where." And the cat replies that it doesn't matter which way you go. And Alice says, "So long as I get somewhere." "Oh, you're sure to do that," said the cat, "if you only walk long enough." Well, we do not want to be like Alice, aimlessly wandering, and a theory of change will guide us along our way. Next slide. Generally speaking, a theory of change is a longitudinal plan, which means that it is implemented over time. And parenthetically, when you look at time intervals for programs, We tend to plan in 12-month, 1-year segments, and we budget accordingly, and yet change may occur quickly in less than 12 months, or it can take a few years for change really to take hold. Be aware of this as you develop your proposal and your timelines. Next slide. Theory of change assumes a cause and effect relationship, which is based on a working supposition that you develop. For example, we say that losses due to a home fire leads to disruption in income and food insecurity. Or we say that devastation due to flooding leads to relocation of residents and the need for temporary alternative accommodations. You can see the connection in these statements between the cause and the effect. Next slide. Here's another tool for developing a theory of change. It is called if-then statements, and it includes a set of assumptions. For example, if we link low-income residents to food programs, and if we provide case management services, and if we offer short-term mental health services, then residents' lives will begin to stabilize and they will eventually recover. In these two examples, cause and effect and if-then statements, while the cause may be clear, such as a fire or flood, the effect or impact is for you to determine as the group developing the proposal for funding. Next slide. It is important to note that solutions flow from our understanding and definition of the problem. If we say, for example, that the problem is families have been displaced from their homes and require replacement of material goods, the solution may be clothing, kitchen utensils, or a new cell phone. If, however, we say that families have been displaced from their homes and are experiencing behavioral health consequences, such as PTSD or feelings of loss, anxiety, or depression, a counseling service solution may be proposed. Often, of course, there are multiple problems that result from a disaster, and we need to decide on the problem that we propose to address for which funding is requested. And our request, of course, needs to be matched by our ability to provide the funded response. Next slide. The next part of my presentation is a high-level view of preparing a proposal for funding. While you may be a new organization with a brief history, there are strategies in proposal writing to look like a lion. Next slide. In its basic form, a proposal is a step-by-step logical request for support. As a sequential step-by-step presentation, a request for grant funding in most instances, say more than 90% of the time, is in the format and progression of information that you see here. It sometimes begins with a summary, which is written last once the narrative is developed, and is often required in large applications. There is power in summaries, as they sometimes are used to describe your project to decision makers by staff that have reviewed your request. Next is the agency capabilities section, because before we can discuss a problem or our response to a problem, we need to establish our credibility as the applicant. The agency capabilities section is our overview of our history, our accomplishments, and shows that the proposed plan fits within our mission, as well as other proofs that we are the right group to put forth the proposal. Following the agency capability section is the statement of need, which is sometimes called the problem statement, and it informs the reviewer about the need that we propose to address. It follows agency capability in that we have already established that we are a credible applicant and that we clearly understand the problem that's described in this section. The program plan, which we discussed as part of our theory of change, is our programmatic response to the statement of need we just described. After a program plan comes our proposed goals and objectives, and writing goals and objectives will be part of a future training. Goals and objectives are a way of projecting measurable change that is anticipated to occur as a result of the program plan. And then from goals and objectives, we write our evaluation section. It is a discussion of the process that we will engage in and the metrics that we plan to use for reaching our goals and objectives. I trust that you can see the logical progression of information from agency capability to need statement to program plan to goals and objectives and evaluation. The last sections are sustainability and budget. Sustainability speaks to our plan to continue the program once its success has been demonstrated. Some argue that it is a disservice to introduce new programs and to take it away once funding expires. Sustainability is our way of planning for the funded program's continuation after the grant expires. Lastly, the budget section is a way of describing the program in financial terms. A well-done budget allows a reviewer to understand key components of the program, such as proposed positions like a case manager or counselor, and expenditure line items like facility rental, leasing a van, or mileage travel reimbursement for community outreach and engagement. Next slide, Katie. Proposals fill certain functions. In the next few slides, we will discuss 4 purposes of a proposal for funding, as it serves as a plan, a request, a commitment, and a tool of or for persuasion. As a plan, a proposal describes the project concept, explaining how it began and establishing your credibility to address the problem. Secondly, it reflects our process from assessment of the needs to design of the program to calculations that we have made to determine the number of people that we anticipate will benefit. It also describes the resources that will be used and our anticipated outputs and outcomes. Outputs and outcomes also will be explained in subsequent trainings. Lastly, within our proposal, we describe the major activities that will occur and our ability to implement the proposed plan. Next slide. As a request, a proposal is our commitment to use specific resources, usually monetary, but not always, for a specific purpose. As a request, a proposal specifies the exact amount of requested and justifies our assumptions concerning major costs. Lastly, as a request for funding, our proposal clearly ties budget and program together, and all major anticipated expenditures are presented. Next slide. Regarding a proposal being a commitment, remember that a proposal is an exchange between parties, the applicant and the funder, and each receives something in return. You might ask, what does the funder receive? Well, it can be as simply as fulfillment of the funder's mission or specific interests, such as encouraging new models of practice, or perhaps there is interest in receiving recognition or obtaining research data from your initiative. As a commitment, a proposal commits to the funder that certain activities will occur during a specified time with specific deliverables at a specific cost. It also is an exchange between parties. And lastly, a proposal is a binding agreement. As a caution for grant writers, be careful not to promise what you can't deliver. As a grant applicant, our credibility is of utmost importance, and we do not want to overpromise. We are always hopeful that from positive experience with a funder, new opportunities will occur. Next slide. Lastly, a proposal is also a tool for persuasion, as it encourages the funder to honor your request and to partner with you for the proposed endeavor. It shows that you have strong knowledge about the problem and the people you propose to help. And it is also an educational tool for funders unaware of the problem, and it is a credibility building tool to establish your agency as a resource to address the problem. Finally, it is also a long-term relationship building tool between you and the funder. Next slide. Here are some do's and don'ts when writing a grant. Firstly, obviously, we need to know what we're doing. This gentleman heard that he had to make a proposal to a funder, but he clearly didn't know how to do it. So he brought a diamond engagement ring to the meeting with the funder. Here are basic definitions of what a proposal achieves, taken directly from the dictionary, and I find that they're instructive and they're simple. A proposal is an act of putting forward or stating something for consideration. It is something proposed, and it is a plan presented for acceptance. All three definitions apply to our work as grant writers. Next slide. Here are the do's and don'ts. First, be specific as what is needed, planned, and requested. Be thorough describing the need of the project, your project plan, and your request, as it enables the funder to determine whether the request aligns with the funder's interests, whether the project responds to the needs you identified in your proposal, whether you have a solid plan for implementation, and the potential impact that you anticipate that the project will have on beneficiaries. Also avoid weak descriptions of need, such as using terms like many, few, or a lot, and where you can, use reliable sources, such as the US Census or homeless point-in-time counts or community studies. Include the estimated number of low-income persons you plan to help or the number of older adults in your community that are affected by the problem and will benefit from your program. Keep in mind that when projecting the number of persons who will benefit, higher numbers are not always better. Be realistic in what you plan to accomplish. Minimize the use of local jargon or professional jargon unless you know that the funder will understand the terms that you are using. And always be positive in your approach. You are giving the funder the opportunity to partner with you. You are an applicant and not a supplicant. Next slide. Here are additional do's and don'ts. Document your proposal's statement of need with quotations, statistics, and credible sources. For example, in addition to service data that your organization may compile, like the number of eggs or poundage of food distributed each week, if your organization is seeking to expand its services, consider including a case study of a client's success or quotes from individuals who have benefited from your program. Showing positive results can help make the case for expansion. While establishing a new program, consider including data from credible sources about how the same or a similar program has improved outcomes elsewhere, which means that there is evidence behind the proposed program. Don't mention what you'll do if you don't get funding. Remember, you are creating an impression of success. And be careful to fully respond to the request for proposals, such as adhering to format and funding guidelines. This also includes the type of agencies that qualify to apply. Make sure you meet the criteria to be an applicant. Look at the types of projects that are being sought for funding, the application components and supporting documents, and the method of submission. For example, some funders prefer submissions in Adobe Acrobat, while others Word, and others want to see the proposal in Excel. Not following guidelines can be used as a way of filtering out applicants. Next slide, regarding do's and don'ts. Write in one voice. While sections of a proposal may have been written by several writers with different styles, before completion, it needs just one voice. Consistency is important in reducing reader confusion, and it helps the proposal flow from beginning to end. Always maintain a focus on the benefits to the people that you propose to help. Benefits to the organization or its staff are secondary to the benefits of the client. For example, if a proposal requests funding to support a food bank or food drive, it is easy to show the direct benefit to residents who are food insecure. However, say your facility needs a photocopier or a new telephone system. Funding is not being requested to make it easier for staff to duplex community resource lists or to receive calls, although both are important. But the new copier ensures that resource materials for clients are crisp and clear and can be quickly reproduced. And a telephone system improves client access to services at your agency. As I said previously, solutions flow from our description of the problem, and always ensure that the problem statement precedes and is aligned with your implementation plan. In subsequent webinars, next slide, Katie, sorry. In subsequent webinars, we will be drilling down on how to develop these sections of a proposal for funding. In just a bit, Sarah will share with you more information about these offerings. Next slide. I know that everyone here and everyone in the community is up for the challenge. Just as we have landed a person on the moon, someday, too, we will also solve many of our social problems. Now it's time for a quick intermission, and I turn it back to Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Gary. This is Sarah Peterson speaking again, and we're coming up to our break. At this moment, I'd like to acknowledge Andrea Rocha, who is our interpreter providing real-time Spanish interpretation for this entire webinar. So one of the main reasons that we're taking our break is to give her a chance to rest for just a moment. Our break will be for 5 minutes. And during that time, whether it's before you leave or when you come back, please also take a look at the poll questions that will be shared with you. They'll appear right on your screen. We'll review the group's answers when we come back, but your answers won't be visible as belonging particularly to you. They'll only be combined with the group. So please enjoy your short break. I'll call you back when it's time to return. You'll hear my voice. Thank you. All right. As we're gathering, I'm going to ask that the poll be closed and our answers be displayed. And Lily, I'll ask if you can discuss those briefly with us. Also, if I could especially request that you read all the questions. Some folks missed some at the bottom, and so just if you can preview them all with us as we're taking a look at the answers. Thanks.
Sure, of course. Thank you so much for sticking around. We wanted to give everyone some room to stretch and breathe, collect yourself. We know that we're throwing a lot of information at you, so thank you for still being here. So let's go to the poll. The first question is, please tell us about your organization's grant writing experience. En Spanish, por favor, cuéntanos sobre la experiencia su organización en referente a la redacción de subvenciones. I'm going to do my summary in English, but I'll read the questions in both English and Spanish. It looks like we have quite a mix of experience. So about 43% of people attending here regularly writes grant applications that include partner organization roles. 31% of organizations here regularly write grant applications. 25% have written complex grant applications. And 28%, there might be some double counting here, 28% have written basic grant applications, and about 11% have not had any experience in grant writing. So that's quite a mix. Question 2, what region of California does your organization work in? ¿En qué región de California trabaja su organización? We have a mix here too. I'm so happy to report that we have quite a few people, about 47% from Southern California. I'm slightly biased since I'm here too. 33% in Northern California, 2% from Central, and 21%, again, a little bit of double counting here, are focused on statewide work. Finally, the third question, what types of community do you serve? ¿Qué tipo de comunidades sirven? We have 53% of organizations here serving rural or frontier, or I think rural or frontier communities. 51% are working in suburban communities, and 72% working in urban communities. Back to the GBA team.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you all again all of the participants for joining. It's wonderful to see in the chat such a diverse group from various public and private agencies, program and grants managers, some individuals on the foundation side, so kind of both sides of the equation. And starting with the premise, and I think the poll that we just took kind of bears this out, that only about a quarter of the respondents have indicated that they've engaged in responding to complex requests for funding proposals. We wanted to share some information about how you can effectively prepare for grant funding opportunities, even before a notice of funding opportunity is released, as well as how to sort of quickly and effectively assess whether there is any interest and or that your organization would be eligible to apply. Next slide, please, Katie. So I think as you're doing this, it's always helpful to approach it from the perspective of the funder, who will be looking for several key things, including looking at the credibility of your organization. And this might speak to some degree to how long you've operated in your particular space, as well as the capacity that you can demonstrate in terms of available personnel. It might be facilities, technology, all of the above, to be able to demonstrate that you will have the capacity and ability to implement the project that you're proposing within the specified grant period of performance, as well as evidence of both the problem or need that you're addressing, as well as your chosen solution to that problem or need. And again, sustainability, hopefully being able to demonstrate that you have or will have a diverse set of and reliable set of funding streams to continue your work beyond the initial grant period of performance. Next slide, please. So some key questions to consider before applying or as you're preparing your response to a funding opportunity. Thinking about why your project is a priority now. Clearly, that's something that, when we're talking about climate response and preparedness, disaster preparedness, it may seem implicitly obvious to you, but it may not be for the funder in terms of what you're proposing. Also, again, do you have or expect to have the capacity to implement your project? Thinking about what, if any, evidence-based practices will be utilized. This may or may not be a requirement of the specific funding opportunity to propose an evidence-based practice, but always good to think about and consider ahead of time. If you're proposing something that is new or innovative in some respect that could set your project apart from others under consideration. And is there a potential for replication or scalability of your project, again, beyond the initial pilot phase, to hopefully amplify the benefit beyond just organization and the funded project? And I would probably put at the top of the list, have you discussed the plan with all relevant staff, understanding that those who may be applying for and administering any funding that is secured may very well not be the same individuals who are going to be expected to operationalize the project and respond to any reporting milestones and deliverables. Next slide, please. So helpful in terms of preparation, again, no generic proposals, but funders, both public and private, will tend to request much of the same information for funding opportunities that's helpful to have on file and make sure that is current and up to date, related to both your, it may speak to the eligibility of your organization in terms of your tax exempt status, having updated background and history on your organization, mission and vision statements, your current board roster, and various other standard forms that may be required, particularly by state and federal funding agencies. But what I also would strongly suggest is that you at least develop a short summary, an executive summary of sorts of your project and what you hope to accomplish, as well as at least an outline of a project budget. Again, even before opportunities present themselves, so that you can then take that information and further flesh it out in response to the funding opportunity. Next slide, please. And here again, it may depend on the funding opportunity and the specific funder, but there are common online portals through which you will need to register and maintain an active registration in order to even apply or be eligible to apply for certain funding opportunities. Again, understanding that some folks on the webinar may be well familiar with sam.gov or GuideStar. There may be others who are not as familiar. And these are things that, again, we can help advise as needed in individual technical assistance scheduled sessions, but also things to consider in terms of other community partnerships that you may want to initiate or strengthen. It's rare these days that major funding opportunities will allow organizations to go it alone, as it were. It's generally expected that you will have partnerships in place. And oftentimes there will be the opportunity to provide subawards to project partners to help with implementing a significant part of the scope of work for a project. And also having at least an idea of what your donor stewardship and communications plan might be in terms of communicating with your project partners and community stakeholders regarding project outputs and outcomes and the hopefully positive impact you're having as a result of the project. Next slide, please. So, anatomy of a funding opportunity, and we're not going to do an in-depth look at the Listos California opportunities themselves. We unfortunately don't have time to do that today. However, again, I just wanted to mention that there will be the opportunity to schedule individual TA sessions, and we can certainly help you decipher and or interpret various requirements, program requirements for programs for which you may be interested. Next slide, please. So in terms of positioning yourself for success, there really is not a substitute for reading funding opportunities word for word. However, not necessarily as the first step. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But researching the funding program's focus and priorities, reviewing, if available, examples of previously funded projects that may be similar to your own can certainly be helpful. And again, ultimately understanding all application and program requirements once you've made the decision to move forward and discussing those with your project team. Next slide, please. So here we're going to just, as an example, take a look as a snapshot of the Listos California statewide grant program. Although you'll notice on the right-hand side here, there are multiple Listos California programs, all with their own individual program requirements, available funding, and maximum funding request amounts. So we'll provide some information on how you can get more information on the specific program that may be of interest to you. But generally, as you're looking at a notice of funding opportunity that will likely be lengthy and fairly dense, as a first step, you can usually take, in the first couple pages, a quick scan to see if there usually will be an overview of the program, funding objectives and goals, eligibility requirements to see if your organization will be eligible for the project or the program, what the grant period of performance will be, available funding, and oftentimes how many anticipated awards there will be, so you can try to gauge how competitive the opportunity will be, and the all-important submission deadline as a starting point. Next slide, please. And then I would certainly encourage you to take a look at the reporting requirements, just to make sure right off the bat that your organization will have the bandwidth to respond effectively to any reporting requirements within the specified timeframe. And in this example, it lists the various reports and when those deadlines will be, to make sure that your internal capacity is compatible with that. Next slide, please. Another area that is key to look at is the budget requirements in terms of what is and is not eligible for funding or funding reimbursement under the program. And oftentimes there will be a specific budget format. Oftentimes there will be a template that you can pull down, and these things are, extremely important to follow to the letter in terms of how to fill them out and attach them to the application. The capabilities section, or it sometimes will be requirements of the program, will give you an idea of what the key areas that you'll have to prepare to implement will be, as well as what the personnel requirements will be for the project team that will be implementing the project. Next slide, please. And then again, in order to prepare and understand how your proposed project will be evaluated relative to others, there will usually be a scoring rubric of sorts, and with different scoring for each section, that you can then kind of determine how much time to spend in terms of developing your problem statement, your plan, your capabilities, budget, as well as your evaluation plan, which may involve either internal personnel and or engaging an outside evaluator to help you with that. And then a checklist of all of the required information that will need to be provided to have a compliant proposal. And some of this will be standard information. Some of this will be unique to the funding opportunity itself. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a webinar on January 24th that provided more specific information about the Listos California grant programs. I wanted to direct everyone's attention to the contact email at the bottom of the screen, listosgrants@caloes.ca.gov, which you can certainly use to reach out for more information on the specific Listos California programs. And we will also be available again to help you do a more in-depth review of the RFP of your choice. And I believe with that, I'm going to pass this back to Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Mike. This is Sarah Peterson speaking again, and I am concluding today's presentation with a reminder of the resources that are available on the Climate Capacity website. Most of you have visited this site already because that's where you registered for today's event. And there are other resources available there too. All of our upcoming events will be announced on the website, as well as over the email list. And registration, when it opens for each event, will be available online too. Next slide, please. There are two other resources that I want to highlight on the website. First is the ability to make an appointment with one of GBA's grant writing professionals for personalized assistance. Lily and Mike both mentioned this. This is for any grants questions that you and your organization might have. It could be all the way from assessing your grant readiness in general to reviewing a specific proposal draft or a budget that you've prepared targeted for a specific funding opportunity. The second thing is the ability to join our email list. Many of you have already. The email list is where we're going to be sharing website resources, for example, the recording of this webinar and others, and announcing registration for our upcoming events throughout the year. For example, as you may have seen on the website already, one of the next events that's coming up is our in-person training taking place in Sacramento, serving communities of Northern California on March 13th. And we'll officially open the registration for that event soon. And we hope that some of you who are here will be able to join us in person. Next slide. This last slide is simply a reminder of our contact information for the project. If you start with the website at climatecapacity.philanthropyca.org, you'll be able to connect with all of the resources that we've discussed today. And as a reminder, to reiterate what Lily said in her introduction, all of these resources and events and happenings are available completely free. So please sign up and we hope to see you again. All right, Katie, if you could stop the slides, please. This is our time for questions and answers. So I would like to invite all of our presentation team to come on camera again, so we can all be here together to discuss the questions that we've received. I'll give us a moment to gather on the screen for all of you. Lily, I know you've been busy in the questions and answers box. I don't know if you'd like to highlight anything that's been brought up there.
Yes, I would love to. So we had a couple questions that I think would be great to answer live. The first one will be from Deidre. I'm sorry if I mispronounced her name. Who is asking, will grants explicitly say that they can be stacked with other grants? And this might be a question for Gary or Mike.
I'm not sure I understand the question. It's whether they can be stacked. Was that the word?
Yeah, and so my interpretation of this, and Deidre, feel free to clarify either in the chat or by coming on your microphone. Do grants typically list that you can essentially integrate that grant with other grant opportunities? Is that ever explicitly stated?
Well, I mean, well, the answer is yes. But you have to be the caution, of course, is that you don't want to pay for the same activity through two different sources. So that would be called double dipping. But if you have a larger initiative and one funder funds a portion of it and another funder funds another dimension of it, that's fine. In fact, it's often encouraged, and funders enjoy, my experience is that sometimes funders enjoy partnering with other funders on programs.
Thanks, Gary. Deidre, I hope that answers your question. If you want to follow up on anything, please feel free to drop something in the chat. And the second question that I think would be good to discuss live, since many of you are probably here to learn a little bit more about the Listos opportunity. The question is Listos doing another round of funding opportunities? And I'll go ahead and answer this one. And we also have members of the Listos California team on the call. If anyone wants to jump in after I finish answering, please feel free to. So the current notification of funding opportunity for Listos is live and has been since around the beginning of this month. And the deadline for it is March 4th. So if you are in the process of trying to decide whether you would like to apply for this opportunity, or if you've won Listos grants before, or if you're planning to apply for this year and would like the grant writing support, please feel free to get in touch with our team. We want to be a resource for you and provide any assistance that we can. Let's see. Some other questions are coming through. A couple from Elizabeth here. So what other grants are there besides Listos? Maybe GBA, do you want to elevate any opportunities?
Well, I mean, part of the answer is part of this initiative is to identify other sources, and we'll be continuously updating our webpage with additional opportunities as well as deadlines and so forth. In addition to that, depending upon what community you're in addition to specific, say, public initiatives, private foundations are participating in this initiative and are located, in your community or serve fund in part your communities. And there you may want to look at funders that might be interested in disaster-related, issues. And they certainly would be an appropriate group to at least to test the waters and see if they might be interested.
And then I will add to that by saying that our team at Philanthropy California is actively tracking federal funding that will be granted to different states to support climate and disaster resilience. So we will be posting the funding opportunities that we want to elevate on the climatecapacity.philanthropycalifornia.org website. So you can check in regularly with us to find out about different opportunities for your organization. We can help you decide whether it's a good fit for you or not. And, we're looking to elevate opportunities specifically for rural communities, inland communities, and looking across multiple types of hazards. So we're looking for ways to highlight funding that can make its way to your communities where you're at. Elizabeth, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Let me just add something logistical there, which is that's a great reason to be on our email list as well. When we have items that have a due date or some urgency or that we really want to elevate, we'll be sharing them over email. And so make sure that you're on the email list. I would also say, and Lily, add what you want around this, but one of the reasons for the events that we're having is to bring people together and organizations together for partnerships and networking. And so that's an area that can be explored as well. And that we hope that you'll come with questions about is exploring ways that you can connect with other organizations and that you can work together, whether it's explicitly on funding opportunity, or it's something more informal, more directly related to disaster response. But that's something that is in the purview of this project as well, is making those connections.
Thanks, Sarah. We have a couple questions about the webinar series and the in-person trainings. I just answered one in the chat about our first live training and other future live trainings. The very first live in-person event that we'll be doing takes place in March. It'll be on March 13th at the Sierra Health Foundation in Sacramento. And we are looking to reach out to different partners within the philanthropic sector to host us for other in-person trainings. And there will be locations in Northern California, Southern California, as well as San Diego and Imperial counties, as well as a tribal location in the northern and southern parts of California. These are not yet confirmed, but we are looking to build relationships and partnerships along the way and move at that speed of trust that we value and talk about so much within our sector. So like Sarah said, please plan to stay tuned and sign up for the mailing list for the latest updates. And Elizabeth, the next webinar, we haven't confirmed a date for that yet either, but again, the mailing list will be the best way to find this information.
I want to say a few words about the overall schedule of events that we've got for the year and kind of what they'll cover in each different type. And Lily, I'm going to give you a moment with this long question in the Q&A box. We'll have 5 webinars over the course of the year. This was the first one. So 4 are upcoming. Those are statewide in audience. That means, everyone can join and it doesn't have a specifically local focus. We'll be using those to present elements of grant funding, proposal writing, grant management, grant readiness in depth, in ways that will be widely applicable to a variety of organizations and a variety of projects. As we schedule and and unveil the schedule of in-person events, there's going to be 8 of those. So variety of locations in different parts of the state. Those will be a more local focus. That will be where like specific organizations are coming together to meet people in their neighborhood or in their region. And we'll have an opportunity to really take a deep dive on local concerns, local communities, experiences, possibly with Listos funding or other types of funding. So really to get like an on the ground perspective of what climate resilience and disaster response looks like for you specifically there where the in-person event is happening.
Wonderful. Nicole, thank you so much for your question. And this is a very strategic one. I wonder, Kiran Kumar, are you on the line and are you able to come on to support answering this question? Or Tom?
Karen, if maybe you could raise your hand and that'll help Tom identify you and ask you to unmute so you can speak. There we go. Great.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry to put you on the spot, Kiran, and thanks for coming on.
Okay, cool. Hi, Stephanie. I think I see your question here about braiding funding with philanthropic dollars. I would say not specific to any one philanthropic funding program, but a hearty yes to that question. Part of the goal of this overall effort, beyond just connecting folks to public funding sources, is also to bring philanthropic organizations more into this space to think about the catalytic role that they can play in supporting some of these broader efforts to go after public funding. So let's maybe take that one offline too on a case-by-case basis, but would love to think about where folks are looking at philanthropic funding opportunities and how we can help y'all leverage those resources in pursuing broader public funding. I should probably also introduce myself. I'm Kiran Kumar. I'm new with the Northern California Grantmakers as Director for Climate and Disaster Resilience and working very closely with Lily and the rest of this team.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks for reminding us that you're part of the Philanthropy California team. And, you know, will be with us throughout the development of all of these events and topics and kind of bringing in those concerns that folks are raising with a lot of expertise and opportunities to really bring them alive in the trainings that we offer.
Great. And maybe we have enough time for just one last question. Marcy, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to answer your question live. Will there be opportunities for people to network? For example, letting people see each other on screen and interact? I want to say this is a great question. We are currently developing what the rest of the webinar trainings will look like. The in-person ones will have more, you know, of a social feel because we will be there live. But if you have feedback or suggestions on what you would like to get out of these sessions, especially when it comes to making connections and being able to network to build those relationships and partnerships across organizations, especially where you are doing similar work, please let us know in the feedback form. We would love to have your thought partnership in designing how this can be valuable for you. So Marcy, that's a murky answer to your question, but in general, we would like to have this be a valuable space for whoever is here. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of talking heads on Zoom, which is not ideal. So give us your feedback and we would love to work with you.
Great. That's a good segue into our wrapping up moments of this webinar, which includes the fact that you'll be shared out to your web browser a survey as the webinar closes. This is a place, like there's places in the survey literally to write down the suggestions that we've been talking about that folks have been raising. And if you've had other ideas or connections that you've made as you've listened to this and kind of heard what this initiative is supposed to be about, please be as specific as you want, share as much information as you want in the survey that you'll be receiving shortly. So I'm going to wrap things up for today and remind you the survey link will open in your web browser. We're sending it out to you automatically. We'll be grateful for any feedback that you're willing to provide. As Lily said, it's going to help us design the curriculum for all of these events as we go forward, and the activities and the opportunities to partner and to share information with one another. So thank you so much to our presenters. Thank you to our interpreter in the Spanish channel. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Our webinar is concluded. You may disconnect now.